Thank you very much. I'm overwhelmed by that introduction and welcome. I have to tell you, I'm very humbled by being here because there's so many distinguished individuals who have served in our armed forces that are here present in our audience. I will never forget this day. For me to be able to one day hopefully be able to go to my grandchildren and tell them that I met a Tuskegee Airman is a privilege. So in all honesty, I'm kind of wondering what I'm doing here to be able to talk to you. I feel like there's so many others that should be standing here to tell a story. I am going to explain to you a story that I went through in my military career where I had an experience. On the 11th of September, we as a nation have lost our innocence when terrorists attacked our soils, attacked our citizens. And we're going through a difficulty, and we're in a war against terrorism now, which in my estimation, in my opinion, will last the rest of our lives. Politically and intelligence and militarily, we will be fighting terrorism and evil in the world for the remainder of our lives. But we will go through these difficulties, and we will become stronger and better and more mature for having gone through them. I truly believe that. Because I believe that in our lives, when we face difficulties in our personal lives, our family lives, professional lives, or even as a country, we can learn from things and become stronger for having gone through it. Because I can tell you on a personal note, the experience I had where I was an F-16 fighter pilot when I was shot down over Bosnia, spent 6 days surviving a war zone, actually ended up being one of the most positive things that's ever happened to me. Now, I want to share this story with you, and beyond just entertaining you right now with this adventure story of where I was out in the war zone for 6 days of combat survival, and more importantly, I also want to share with you what I was going through while I was there surviving in war-torn Bosnia, what I was feeling mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, so you can almost comprehend what it was like for me to be there. And I also want to share with you that while I was out there struggling for my life, that there were 3 things that were inspiring me. And the 3 things that inspired me in that war zone, I also realized are the 3 most important priorities I have in my life. The first being my relationship and the love I have for God. And the second was the love I have for my family. And then the third was the love I have for my country, the United States of America. So I look at my entire experience in Bosnia through my faith, my relationship with God. Well, unexpectedly, while flying an F-16 over Bosnia, a Soviet surface-to-air missile impacts my aircraft. My airplane's exploding around me before I can eject. I had to eject over 5 miles above the earth at a equivalent airspeed around 500 miles per hour. With a parachute descent that lasts up to nearly half an hour before I can even hit the ground, the enemy is ready there to capture me immediately. I'm now hunted down like an animal in Bosnia for 6 days, where I don't even have the right to live. I'm desperately trying to talk to somebody on a radio. Finally, NATO forces hear me. The United States Marines come in their helicopters. They pick me up, but as we're flying out, we're being shot at by surface-to-air missiles, anti-aircraft artillery, and small arms fire. Well, again, that experience ended up being one of the most positive experiences I've ever had in my life. And I don't want to recommend a near-death experience to you. But the reason why it was such a positive event in my life was because of my relationship with God. I explored it in depthly like never before in my life. I was in constant prayer 24 hours a day while I was out there. And I was able to look within inside myself and find out more about who I was as a person than never before in my life. My weaknesses and strengths were totally exposed out there. But I want you to know I didn't have any revelations. I didn't have any new lessons learned there. I had all the old lessons that I grew up with in the church and with my family refortified to me. And that is for me personally, that the greatest source of peace and strength and love and comfort that I can find in my life comes from my relationship I have with God. Now, I did learn, though, there wasn't so much importance to be a person of faith as it was to have trust. Now, if you would have come up to me while I'm lying underneath the branches of the trees, and the enemy's walking by me just about a couple of feet away from me, ready there with their guns to kill me or capture me, and at that moment, if you would have come up and said, "Scott, I want you to sign a contract." But when you sign this contract, all of your worldly possessions will vanish. Everything that's material in your life is gone. But we're going to return you to the most valuable thing you have in your life, that being your family. To be able to come back to see my mother, my father, and sister and brother again, I would have signed that contract in a split second. Because my family means more to me than anything in the entire world. They were the sole reason why I had a will to survive out in Bosnia, a reason to even come back home. But even though I'm 80 miles into this war zone, where there are no friendlies there and there are 3 armies fighting around me, you would have thought I would have felt very secluded and lonely at that point in my life, but I didn't. Because I had a team that was there supporting me. And the team that actually inspired me in my time of need went beyond the scope of the military team that I'm a part of. The team that actually meant the most to me while I was out there was right back here in my home country. That was an American team that was inspiring me while I was out there. Because I realized how here in the United States of America, we value human life. How we're not going to leave one of our own behind. How I would be never forgotten and I would be rescued. And I never doubted that. I don't know how I can even express to you in words as to how much that meant to me while I was out there. And whether you knew it or not, every single one of you here was a part of that inspiration for me while I was there. I want to personally thank you for that. Now, the day that I went in prior to flying this 47th mission over Bosnia, I hadn't flown for 10 days. I was at a temporary assignment at Vicenza, Italy. And coming back to my permanent assignment, which was at Aviano Air Base with the Triple Nickel Fighter Squadron, you would think that as an F-16 pilot, my primary job would be to fly an airplane. But we all have additional duties as officers in a squadron to be supervisors or run different functional shops. And I had just taken over my new desk job as being the unit life support officer, so I'm going through all my paperwork on my desk when a good friend of mine who's a scheduler in the squadron comes up to me. And he has a schedule in his hand for the next day, which was the 2nd of June. And he looks at it and he says, "Scott, there's an opening here to fly a mission over Bosnia. And it's going to be the last day that we fly missions there for a month and a half because we're going to go into a training cycle." But he reminded me that if I flew this one mission in the month of June, I'd still be able to qualify for my hostile fire pay bonus for that month. Because each pilot that flew over Bosnia, whether it was one day of the month or more, it didn't matter, would receive a bonus. And that bonus was $150. Well, I want you to know it was not worth the $150. And the fact was that we even joked and laughed about the fact that I was going to earn this bonus on that one mission. And the reason why we started to laugh about it is that we never did it for the money. I don't know of anyone who joins the military trying to get rich. You know? We're volunteers because we believe in serving our country. We believe in defending our freedom and our way of life. And that's the only reason why you put on that uniform. Now, when I went in on the 2nd of June, I met up with my flight leader, Captain Bob Wright, and Wilbur and I are both equally qualified to lead a mission of combat, but he never sent a single aircraft into hostile territory. You always have a minimum of 2 airplanes, have a team, some element of support for each other. But on that mission, as the assigned leader, Wilbur had to make the decisions, run the tactics, keep tabs on the weather, and talk on the radios. I was there solely to be his wingman for this mission now, and to fly a formation off of his aircraft and to back up his decisions. Our mission was to enforce a no-fly zone over Bosnia. There was an atrocious civil war occurring there at the time between 3 major factions, Croats, Muslims, and Serbs in Bosnia. And atrocities that we haven't seen since the likes of Hitler were occurring there. Genocide, concentration camps, innocent civilians, women and teenage men being lined up to be executed in cold blood, their bodies dumped into mass graves. Women would be raped there for psychological warfare, try to impregnate them with their enemies' babies. Young children would be killed by snipers as they would try to cross the streets. Oh, they had the fear of stepping on many of the landmines in that region. There were a lot of innocent people being hurt and killed in that area. And the United Nations wanted to promote peace in that area. And one of the resolutions they came up with was that there would be a no-fly zone over Bosnia, preventing any of the warring factions over there from flying their aircraft overhead so that they couldn't drop bombs on people on the ground. NATO forces were brought in to police that no-fly zone. And as part of the NATO forces, we would patrol around the skies of Bosnia, similar to a police officer patrolling a neighborhood on a 24-hour curfew. But I want you to envision a couple things right now that are important. First of all, we were not there at that time as a warring faction. We were solely there on a peacekeeping effort, but yet we're still in a hostile environment, where integrated air defense systems of Yugoslavia are still intact, which means all the radar sites can look up and watch our flight paths day and night. They knew where we were flying all the time. Other communications posts can listen in on our frequencies. They knew everything there was to know about our operations. There weren't any secrets. But then even more threatening to us as pilots, all the missile sites and anti-aircraft artillery emplacements that are in country would still be actively there trying to shoot at us and hunt us. We would avoid their locations when we knew where they were from intel sources, but that was like walking through a minefield out there on our peacekeeping effort trying to avoid these threats. And Bosnia is not a big country. It took us maybe about 2 hours to patrol the entire area. And as Wilbur and I are now assigned to fly out on a patrolling mission, we were specifically tasked to fly in the northwest corner of Bosnia to monitor that sector in a combat air patrol. And after a long period of time of NATO airplanes flying that area, the enemy had watched us develop into a predictable pattern. And what we didn't realize is that they brought in a mobile surf-to-air missile site, placed it underneath where we were flying all the time to set up a trap to shoot one of us down. And guess what? They were successful. I got caught in the trap. Because as Wilbur and I are flying in this northwest corner of Bosnia now, we knew about missile sites that would be to the west of us, to the north of us, and to the northeast of us. What we didn't realize, though, is that we were flying right on top of an SA-6 site. And as Wilbur and I are in our formation, we're about 2 miles apart from each other. We're parallel, going down track, and we're headed towards the west. We're looking out for enemy aircraft with our onboard radar and a visual lookout, when I heard him come up on the radio and say, "Basher, 5-1 threat east." So I looked inside my cockpit, didn't have an indication of a threat. Wilbur's indication goes away within just seconds. Now, not only are we talking to each other about this possible threat, there's also an airborne command post that heard our threat call. And they went up to the U-2 reconnaissance airplane overhead and other intelligence gathering networks to see, is there a threat emitting in that area that we didn't know about? Well, if the word had come back that there was something detected there, we would have left the area. But the word came back, we were in the clear. So as we came up now to the Croatian border, which we can't cross for political purposes, we turned back towards the east. And after a few minutes of flying, I received an indication on my plane. And I get on the radio and I say, "Basher, 5-2 threat east." Wilbur responds by telling me that he doesn't have an indication of a threat. Now, from the time I get the indication in my airplane toward the missile impact is about 5 seconds, and I'm shortly underneath the parachute thereafter. In fact, I never even saw the missiles coming up at me. Never had enough time to go through a defensive maneuver or put out a decoy. All I had was this red flash going off the right side of my plane, and then bam, the missile impacts. And it wasn't until I'm back in the hospital, or after I'm rescued for the first time, where I'm able to talk to Wilbur on the phone to ask him, what happened? He said, well, 2 missiles are shot at you. They came up from underneath our nose. First one went right up in between our airplanes. Second one, he said, came up, hit dab smack at the belly of your plane. He told me, I remember seeing the airplane exploding, broke up into a couple of pieces with the left wing folding over. He said, I remembered the nose section breaking off while I was on fire, and it fell off into the clouds. I never saw you eject. I never saw a parachute, so I thought you were dead. You know what I told him? I said, that must have been so cool to watch. You know, who's here really seen something like that in real life? This isn't even a movie. So we started laughing about the experience, but then I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, what am I laughing about? I almost died at that moment in my life. Well, the only thing I can conclude about laughing about near-death experiences is that I believe in our lives we go through good times and we'll go through bad times. But no matter where you are in that roller coaster ride of life, it's important to maintain your sense of humor about things. I can tell you, God's got a sense of humor. He laughs at me every day. So, but when that missile impacts, my cockpit starts to break apart in front of me. I'm immediately engulfed in flames, and I'm reaching for the ejection handle as fast as humanly possible. While I'm doing that, I'm praying. I said, Lord God, please, if it's your will, I don't want to die. In a flash of a second, I thought about how I've been so blessed to live a phenomenal life. But I still have something I want to live for. If it's your will, I don't want to die. And much to my relief, when I pull that ejection handle, the canopy on the F-16 departs, and I'm ejected out at 27,000 feet parallel with the horizon. And I could see a piece of the aircraft now flying around me. And it's here that if I would let the eject system work on automatic mode, the seat will have me in it free falling down to an altitude of 15,000 feet, and then the parachute should automatically open up. If everything's working right. You have to understand, at that moment, I'm thinking to myself, this plane just blew up around me. I don't know if this parachute's going to even function at all. And now I'm looking down at the ground 5 miles below me, think I'm just going to fall to my death. And that deeply disturbed me. So I wanted to know if that parachute would function at all. So I pulled the manual override handle, the emergency handle on the right-hand side of my seat. When I pull that handle, much to my relief, the parachute opens up, my descent rate slows down, and this is now the first time I have the actual ability to even think about what's happening to me. Because up to that point, for those few short seconds, I'm just reacting to stay alive. This is where my training in the military became so valuable to me, because it was something tangible for me to hold on to in a time of chaos. And I knew it was based off of previous successes and lessons learned from the past, and it was there to save my life. So I instinctively went through my emergency checklist of checking canopy, visor, mask, C-kit, LPU, 4-line release. And as I'm going down the checklist now, I'm looking out over the countryside of Bosnia. And I want you to know, it was actually beautiful from that high above the ground. Because I could see this large city off to the west and a highway that ran off to the east. And to the north of the highway, there's open fields. And to the south, there's a lot of hills and mountainous terrain, scattering of forest areas everywhere I looked, farmhouses and villages. It was a very populated area. But as I'm watching this, it was like watching a motion picture unfolding before my eyes, because I really couldn't believe that this was happening to me. Bad things are never supposed to happen to you in life, are they? You always think it's going to happen to somebody else. But what brought me to the reality of the situation was that something caught my eye to the south of my position. and there was a brush fire now that I was spying. There was like a grayed out area in the ground where some smoke was coming out of it. Well, I realized as I looked at that that's where parts of my aircraft had impacted the ground. That's where that F-16 that I was in just moments ago was now lying in ruins there in Bosnia. That little comfortable bubble I'd taken for granted, which I would assume was going to fly me back to Italy that afternoon. Because I want you to know, I had plans that evening. I had planned to go out to a nice Italian street cafe, order a nice bowl of spaghetti, have a little glass of red vino, and watch beautiful Italian ladies walk by the street. Well, that's when I looked down at Bosnia and I realized, that's not going to happen down there. And that's when reality set in. And that's when I said to myself, Scott, you better get your act together. Because the next mistake you could make could be the last mistake of your life. But I knew fate had a role to play, but I don't want to make any mistakes that fate go against me. Well, unfortunately, when you're shot down over hostile territory like this, you land on top of the people that shoot you down. And there was no guessing who I was. I looked like the Goodyear blimp over Bosnia. I'm coming down a parachute that's colored with panels that are white, brown, green, and orange. So it's like having a big neon sign over my head telling them all where I was. And I could see them collecting below me in their vehicles along the highway, following me along as I'm drifting down to the ground, ready to capture me immediately. I landed about 50 yards to the south of the highway. If I would have been caught to the north of the highway in open fields, there was nowhere to hide. I landed in a small clearing among some trees about the size of the stage up here. If I would have been entangled in the trees, there's no way I would have escaped. When I hit the ground, I disconnect from my parachute, I run over, I grab my survival rucksack, I stick it underneath my arm, I start to run. You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking, I'm young, I've been working out in the gym for the last 3 months on the aerobicycle, I'm in great shape, and I have more adrenaline running through my body than I've ever had in my life. By the time they get to this parachute, I'll be 20 miles south up that hill is what I'm thinking. I figured, I'm serious. I was dead serious. I would run right back to Italy if I could. But I don't know how to explain this to you other than the fact that, one, I didn't know where I was running to, or what was around the next corner. And after running about 200 yards, it wasn't where I was hyperventilating out of shape, but this whole overwhelming situation hit me like a big weight and just came collapsing down on top of me. So I froze in my tracks. I looked around for a place to hide. I didn't have any areas of tall grass. I didn't have any bushes to hide in. All I had were clumps of trees. There were like little stands of trees where the branches were like an umbrella that went down to the low-lying grass. And it was hollow in the center of the stand of trees because there was no undergrowth. But I was able to find some cover underneath the low-lying branches. But that was also right next to where people would walk by me in the low-lying grass areas. But I got underneath the branches of the trees. I pulled out my survival radio and I called out immediately for Wilbur. And I said, Wilbur, this is Zulu. I made 2 calls to Wilbur and he never responded. All I could hear now was static on the radio. Now I could hear the vehicles approaching the parachute area and I started to hear voices. So I shut off my radio for fear of the noise giving away my position. Then just minutes later, an elderly man and a teenage boy walked within about 5 to 6 feet of me. They're the only 2 individuals that I saw the entire time I was out there in Bosnia that were not armed. After that, everyone I saw was carrying a weapon. Well, that was 3:30 in the afternoon. The sun didn't go down for 6 hours. That was the longest 6 hours of my life. And time there had a completely different meaning than it does here today. I never had to look at my watch because I was never late for any meetings in Bosnia. But now I had different tasks I needed to accomplish every single hour and every 24-hour period just to try to stay alive out there. And actually, my activities changed. In Bosnia, my days were my nights, and my nights were my days. But there was the one time I looked at my watch, and that was at 7 o'clock that first evening when I heard the first gunshot. It was an area about half the size of a football field where I'm hiding. I counted them firing off their weapons 6 times, different intervals, locations, in random order as I'm out there hiding. Well, the only thing that I could conclude while I'm lying there is that, number one, they just tried to kill me by blowing up my aircraft. Now I have to assume that they see something or hear something and they think it's me and they're shooting at it. I have never had more fear that I was going to lose my life than at that moment. When they say that your life flashes before your eyes, well, I want you to know I didn't see it as a motion picture. I saw it in still photos. I saw my family members and my friends and experiences that I hadn't remembered in years from back when I was a young boy. And actually, one of the first persons I really reflected back upon was the first girl I ever fell in love with. Remember how I was 18 years of age, and I was madly in love with her, but I was too shy to tell her that I cared about her. And at that time, I had a dream as a senior in high school to become a fighter pilot. So I knew that that meant I'd have to go off to college and years of training in the military, and I'm thinking to myself, this young relationship's never going to make it anyways. So we went our separate ways in life, and I never told her how I felt about her. Well, guess what? I achieved my dream to become that fighter pilot, and only to be lying in the woods of Bosnia. I wish I could go back in time, marry that girl from high school, move to a little town, and just be a postal worker or something like that. But you can't change the past. You can't go back in life. I learned a couple things from that. In my life, I better be careful what I wish for, because I might get it. As well as if I have the opportunity to tell somebody that I care about them, I'm going to take the first chance I get, because I might not have the second opportunity. Well, that was the most active time for the enemy out there searching for me. I could see them walking all around me 360 degrees until it was extremely dark out that evening. And the two things I'm very hypersensitive to the entire time I'm there are motion and noise. Because even the slightest motion or noise could draw attention to my location and get me captured or killed. So I lay still for hours. And just to give you examples as to how slow and methodical I was, if I was lying on my back to roll over to my side to access some equipment, it could take me 30 minutes. To open up my pocket to take out my compass could take another half an hour. To go from where I was lying down in my bedded area to collect up my survival pack, to stand up into the tree branches, to walk 3 feet out into the grass could take up to 2 hours. I was in no hurry to get caught. And that first evening, when it was extremely dark out, I evaded to an area where I felt more secure to open up my rucksack. And inside the rucksack, I found a wool mask and some gloves and some socks to try to stay warm. And then on my survival vest, I had a global positioning system. That's a handheld unit that can tell you your exact location on Earth when you get 3 signals from satellites. And it gives you a latitude and longitude readout. And every hiding spot I was in, I'd get my coordinates, and then I converted those to a prearranged code to tell rescue forces where I was on an open radio frequency. Because we realized that the enemy is going to be monitoring our radio calls. And as I did every night, I got up on the radio, and I'm calling out anyone, Basher 5-2, hoping somebody would hear me. And after 3 radio calls over some time, nobody responds. So I shut off my radio to save my batteries and to think about some things. The first assumption was I have to assume that nobody knows I'm alive. I'm virtually dead now, that's our world. How am I getting out of the situation? I'm 80 miles into a war zone where I'd have to cross over a mountain range to the Croatian coastline to be able to get to friendly territory. And I figured that might take me over a year's period of time to get out of there if I had a walkout. So I thought about the survival training I received in the Air Force. And beyond, though, the skills and techniques our instructors taught us at survival school, I remember one instructor telling us in a time of real combat survival, don't forget to do the most important thing. And that's to use your common sense. Think for yourself. Don't get flustered in this time of chaos. Come up with a simple plan you can follow. It's flexible enough to face your own challenges. And I did that. I came up with a long-term plan. Worst case survival, I'd have to eat off the land, as well as that battery in my radio was only going to last me 15 hours. If that battery went out, I was walking out. So I came up with a long-term plan of survival to be able to stay out there for 45 days. But if I wasn't successful in returning home within 45 days, was I going to roll over, die, and quit and give up? Absolutely not. I have to admit, though, was there wishful thinking at that moment that Star Trek could beam me home? Yes, I have to admit there was. But I realized wishful thinking and negative thoughts weren't going to get me home. I had to push them off to the side and keep a positive mental focus, because that was the only thing that was going to help me get back. And in that time, I only had to spend a few short 6 days camping out there, to where I hid in 3 different locations, evaded over the course of 2 different nights. I could see the armed individuals walking nearby me every day except for the last day. I could look up and actually see the faces of the Serbian pilots in their helicopters searching for me right above the tree line the first 2 days. Then I could hear it off in the distance the days afterwards, expanding its search envelope. I was wearing less clothing than I have on right now here with a suit. All I had on was a flight suit. I was wet, I was cold and hypothermic and shivering the entire time. My mind is continuously racing as to what I need to accomplish to survive and to survive out, to live out there in this war zone and to maintain my game plan to where I couldn't sleep at all during the evening times and never slept, but I'd shut down maybe for a 20-minute nap 2 or 3 times during the day. My heart's pounding like I'm running this marathon day and night. Even though I'm lying down the majority of the time, I lost well over 25 pounds in those 6 days. And I didn't have any food with me, just a couple of packages of water, but I was prepared to eat off the land for worst case scenario. But really what I had out there for 6 days, you couldn't even have made a small salad out of. But I had some leaves and some grass nearby that I could pick easily. And then in my second hiding spot, there was a decayed worm right by my head. No, I didn't eat the worm. But it was being feasted on by a nest of ants. And I ate about 12 of the ants, about a dozen of them. I reached into the ant pile, I grabbed the first ant, I popped it in my mouth, and I crunched down on it. It's kind of sour. But I want you to know, after you eat about 12 ants, you don't sit back and go, oh boy, I'm so full. No more seconds, thank you. So much as actually, do you know what I really gained from eating the ants? That was my entertainment value. Who here has ever tried to catch an ant? I want you to know it's really not that easy, because as soon as you catch the first one, they scatter everywhere. And it's like a game now for me to be able to catch them. Because in this time of stress, of surviving out there for my life, I needed a mental vacation. I didn't have anybody to talk to, or a computer game, or a TV, or a radio to play with. So therefore, I found my entertainment by catching the ants. But my primary concern is to intake water. I'm going to get dehydrated very quickly. I'm going to get delirious and die from dehydration a lot faster than malnutrition. So we're taught in survival training, you never ration your water, you ration your sweat. You intake that water, you need it now, and you search for another water source. So after the first 2 days, I'm completely out of the water packages that I had in my survival pack, and I'm desperately looking at my map for a possibility of a water source that would be nearby that I could evade to. There was nothing there. I'm listening for a trickle of a stream or activity of animal life. I couldn't find anything that was an indicator of a water source near my area. The only way I was able to obtain water was when it came to me in the form of rain. And I collect the rain droplets off the nearby leaves and off my rucksack with a sponge I had in my survival kit. And then I took that sponge and I'd squeeze it over a Ziploc bag, and I'd be able to collect a little bit of water that would give me something to drink from for another 2 days. But then on the 5th day, I'm completely out of water, and I'm completely dehydrated, and I've got cotton mouth, and I'm looking to somehow at least moisten my mouth to where I took off my socks I was wearing that entire time because my feet were getting cold and wet. And I wrung the sweat out of my socks over that Ziploc bag. And it wasn't enough to drink from, just enough to wet my lips about 2 times. And also, if you would have looked in that Ziploc bag, you would have noticed that water had a little tint to it. It was a little brown and greenish looking, and it tasted like toe jam soup. It was the most disgusting water I've ever had in my life. But yet, it wasn't so much to get rehydrated as it was a victory. As small as it was a positive victory for me to cling on to. I held on to every little victory I could find out there of telling myself, I'm going to get through this no matter how tough this gets. I'm keeping a positive attitude. I'm going home. Well, while I'm out there, I'm trying to talk to somebody on that radio, trying to get out of there, trying to be rescued. Well, what I didn't realize is that even though I would monitor my radio at certain times throughout each hour, and also I would communicate by sending out a radio call or sending out a beacon, what I didn't know is that at that time, all the airplanes that would normally be flying right over my position on a 24-hour period weren't there anymore. Now they're all flying out over the Adriatic Ocean, about 80 miles away from my location. That ended up being actually about the max range of my radio reception. And because of the line of sight of my radio, it took me 2 nights of getting up to the top of a hill where I was finally able to reach somebody and finally shortly get rescued thereafter. And now that I'm rescued, I'm on board the Navy ship. My commander's there to visit me, and he's asking me if I've been able to talk to my family members. And before I could respond to him, guess what he's doing? Inside of a Navy ship, he's pulling out a cellular telephone where he's now dialing a number to talk to my parents halfway around the world. Well, I want you to know at that point in time, for the previous 6 days, I had a radio that couldn't talk to anybody 80 miles away in the hills of Bosnia to save my life. And I looked at him, I said, how come I didn't have one of those cellular telephones out there? I could use my calling card access number, dialed up the White House and say, excuse me, I'm in Bosnia, come and get me. Well, what you need to understand is that my survival equipment hadn't been updated since Vietnam. And sometimes we don't always have the most up-to-date and current technology and the best equipment for our frontline forces. So my plug to you is, please call your congressman and tell them that you want your men and women in uniform to have the best. Now, even though we make do with what we have, like when I was evading at night, I would be able to know the area that I came down in my parachute because I had a long time surveying the area while I'm landing. So I knew I wanted to get away from that semi-populated area to land into, away from that highway, up to higher terrain where my radio could work better, hopefully to be in an area if they came in to pick me up with helicopters that they wouldn't be immediately threatened. But even still, my map wasn't extremely detailed for me to be able to really understand what was around my entire environment. But the most useful thing I had out there to see what was around me were my ears. I could hear things for miles around me. The sporadic fighting in the countryside nearby me, the activities of vehicles moving along roads nearby or off in the distance, or the vehicles going into villages and hearing the commotion around in farmhouses. I was able to paint a mental picture of what was around in my environment, so I knew now which corridor I'm going to evade to the south through. But as you're evading at night, you can't just walk in a straight line in the maze of trees. As well as all you can see are different shades of black and gray, and you get disorientated. So I had out my compass and my global positioning system to help orientate myself to the hilltop that I wanted to go to. But they were glowing so much I couldn't keep them out all the time. And yet the most useful thing I had out there that helped orientate myself as I'm evading at night in this war zone was something I learned when I was a young boy at a summer camp. And it was there that I remember a counselor teaching us how at night you can look up in the northern hemisphere, and when you find the Big Dipper, you can locate the North Star. And by placing the North Star now to my back, I looked to the south and I found a very prominent star right along the southern horizon. And that bright star would help guide me at night while I was out there in Bosnia. And I ended up bedding down now, which ended up being my last hiding spot. And here I was physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted, almost to the point where I couldn't take it anymore. And I needed to find some inspiration, and I found it. I found it through individuals who've gone through a lot worse than I ever did. They make my experience look like a 6-day camping trip. And these individuals that inspired me are those who have gone through a similar situation as my own, but to no fault of their own have been caught. Those who have been prisoners of war in places like the Hanoi Hilton, where they might have been in captivation of upwards of 5 or 7+ years, tortured just about every day of their endeavor. And I'm thinking to myself how they're inspiring me, and the fact that the worst day that I might be having right now, suffering out here surviving a war zone, is a lot better off than the best day of being a prisoner, because I'm still free. But then I thought, not knowing if I do get caught, if I did get caught, if I was able to face what they had to face for that many years, not knowing if I'd ever make it home alive, because some of those prisoners never made it out of there. They died in those camps. If they were able to find the inner strength to be able to get through that experience, to return to their family members, then I'd be able to find it also. But I was wondering, what is my family going through? They don't even know if I'm alive or not. And I thought about my mother. And I remember how when I was a young boy, she told me about a friend of hers who was a Navy fighter pilot. He was shot down in the Vietnam War, where his remains did not even come back to his family in the United States until many years later after that conflict. And he was labeled as missing in action that entire time. And I was sitting there and lying in Bosnia thinking to myself, if I ended up in an unmarked grave here in Bosnia with my mother to never know I made it to the ground alive, that'd tear my heart apart. And I was praying. I prayed 24 hours a day while I was out there, but this is a simple prayer. Be, Lord God, please just let somebody hear me on the radio so that they will know I'm alive and I made it to the ground, so my mother will realize I didn't die in that explosion in the sky. And that next night, I'm determined to find somebody on that radio, and I made myself up to a top of a hill, and I'm in a little clearing on the side of that hill in the darkness of night now, going through my radio drill, sending out my beacon, calling out anyone Basher 5-2, monitoring my radio. What I don't realize, though, is that 2 o'clock in the morning, a good friend of mine is flying his F-16 out over the Adriatic Ocean, Captain T.O. Hanford. And when his replacement came out, instead of rushing back to Aviano Air Base that night to where he could go back to his lovely wife and his comfortable house to get some rest, he saw that there was 30 minutes of fuel on board to stay out on station. And so therefore, he asked for special permission to stay out longer on station to see if he could change the radio frequency over to a frequency I might be monitoring to find me to save my life. But I want you to realize, though, that he did this not even realizing that I'm alive or not, because all the reports are coming back I'm probably dead by that point. But Tio wasn't going to give up on me. He was going to put in that extra effort to save my life. I'll be indebted to him for as long as I live. And he was calling out in the blind, Basher 1-1 for Basher 5-2, how do you hear? I didn't hear him immediately. I'm going through my radio drill when I finally hear 3 clicks come over that frequency. Now I could hear this faint and broken transmission when I could clearly hear him saying, Basher 1-1 for Basher 5-2, how do you hear? I want to scream. I cut my hand over the radio and I call back to him and I say, Basher 5-2, Basher 5-2. And he responds immediately by saying, copy that, what was your squadron in Korea? See, he knew when I was in Korea, I was there as part of the Juvat squadron. He wanted to make sure that this isn't the enemy on the radio just trying to trick him into a trap. So when I gave him the correct answer by telling him, Juvats, Juvats, I'm alive, I'm alive. And he said, copy that, good to hear your voice. I'll never forget that moment for as long as I live. I wanted to laugh, I wanted to scream, and I wanted to cry. Because virtually, I'd been dead to the outside world for 6 days, and now somebody knew I was alive. And if you ask Captain Hanford what's it like to fly an F-16 with a tear coming out of your eye, paints a different picture when you see in the movies. See, this isn't the movies. This is real life. We're real people with real emotions. But you can't let the emotions overrun you because you have a job to do. And we're also in a profession where we are willing to risk our lives because we think it's worth it, the price that we have to pay to defend freedom and make this world a more peaceful place. Now, the teamwork that went in to get me out of Bosnia was incredible. For you to comprehend the entire team that was there to support this effort, from all the different service branches, from back here in the United States to the Pentagon, the headquarters in Europe, throughout the bases in Italy and southern France, the ships off the Adriatic Ocean. See, it wasn't just the Marines that came in there on those helicopters that rescued me. It was an entire team that supported that effort. One of the most beautiful things about being in the military is that we realize that every single member is vital to the success of the mission. And we also entrust our lives into the hands of our fellow service members, knowing that if one of us is in trouble, the rest are there risking their lives to save that other person. That's a very strong bond we have that makes us a very effective team. But there's some decision making now. Are they going to come in and pick me up right away? Or are they going to wait for another nightfall? Because they realize that by the time they can get to me with a helicopter, it's going to be daybreak. And we have better training equipment sometimes to pull off a nighttime rescue mission. But Admiral Smith, who's in charge of all the forces out there, didn't hesitate. He was in London at the time at headquarters, immediately found out I was alive, got on a phone line directly to the closest rescue forces to me, which were the United States Marines out in the Adriatic Ocean. And he asked their commander, can you pull off a daytime rescue? And the colonel said, sir, you give us the air support overhead, we're going in, we're pulling them out. So there wasn't any hesitation. But there were some generals down at Vicenza, Italy, that were not a part of this conversation immediately. And they told me this might have to wait. They said on the radio, they said, Basher 5-2 standby. This might have to wait until mañana. When I heard mañana on the radio, I looked at it and I asked myself, is that supposed to be a code word for tomorrow? You know, I figured that the Bosnian Serbs understood Spanish better than I did. And I got really upset. And I said, no, I want you to get me out right now. And they said, okay, calm down, shut off your radio, save your batteries, and come back up in 30 minutes when we decide what we're going to do. So I shut off my radio, and I'm thinking to myself, when I turn this radio back on, I want them to tell me they're coming in here to rescue me right away. Or I have a good mind to go ahead and shut off my radio, go hide for 24 hours, and I'm not even going to talk to them anymore. When I came up on the radio, they told me, we're coming in to get you. We're throwing everything at you. We're getting all of our assets airborne. Get ready for authentications and signals. I went through a very official means of authenticating who I was to make sure that they realized I wasn't the enemy. I passed my location by using the code and other means. And I had all my signaling devices, from my smoke aid, my gyrogist, my compass, my mirror, and GPS. And now as I'm talking to helicopters, as they're coming inbound from the south to approach me, to rescue me, I have out my compass, like we're trained to do in survival school, to give them a heading to fly right into your location. And as I'm talking to the pilots directly, I feel like the helicopters are getting so loud they're right on top of me. And it was then that I looked up and saw one of the most beautiful sights I've ever seen in my life. And that's a United States Marine Corps helicopter coming over the horizon, halfway around the world, in hospitality to save my life. I want you to know I'm a very patriotic person. But I have never felt more proud of my life to be an American than at that moment. And when those Cobras came in, they started circling around me. And what they were doing is they were securing the area for the CH-53s to come in and pick me up. But I didn't know what they were doing. I just wanted them to throw down a rope, I'll climb up the rope, let's get out of here, is what I'm thinking. And as the Marines came in, they took a leadership role, and they were very professional about doing their job, and they got me on board the helicopter. But as we're flying out of country now, we're egressing through missile sites where we skirted through an SA-6 site that came active. And then we hit Ukrainian Serb territory in this valley where they shot at us with NAM-PADs, which are shoulder-launched surface-to-air missiles and anti-aircraft artillery emplacements and small arms fire. And 3 of the 4 helicopters took damage from ground fire. One of the bullets went through my helicopter. It came through the tail section, went through the roof, slammed down into the canteen on the side of the Marine right across from me. The bullet clanks around the floor. The Marine next to the bullet reaches down to pick it up, and he looks at the bullet, and then he sticks it in his pocket. Well, that's the first time I took a real good look around the helicopter. And what I saw were camouflaged faces of 19-year-old Marines. That was the average age of the Marine that came in there that saved my life. And we came back home from this event in June of 1995, on the 8th of June to be specific. And immediately we were on television and magazines and newspapers thereafter, and we were all labeled as heroes. And after going through an experience like this, I did a lot of thinking as to what makes somebody a hero in life. And I came up with my own definition. I want to share that with you. Because to me, a hero in life is not somebody of notoriety or fame. I personally don't view rock stars, movie stars, or sports stars as heroes. They entertain me. To me, a hero in life is somebody that helps somebody else. And I want you to know, for 6 days when I was in Bosnia, I have to admit, the only person I was thinking about helping was myself to get my pink body back home to see my family again. Those Marines knowingly risked their lives under hostile fire to come in to save my life. They're my personal heroes, as is everybody that supported this rescue effort. But I thought about it. In our society, does it take a 19-year-old Marine underneath those extreme conditions in life to make somebody a hero? Absolutely not. I believe there are so many heroes in our society and day-to-day that are out there helping others that we never really get to recognize until something happens that's tragic, like on the 11th of September, where we see the firemen and the police officers and the emergency medical workers and the doctors and the nurses and the volunteers and the clergymen and just the average citizen coming to the aid of their fellow countrymen to help them through a difficult time. That's what a hero is. I look at every single one of you here as heroes. If in your personal life, you do something to help a family member, a friend, or a stranger, or in your professional life here with Coca-Cola, you even look at the services, the products, and the employment that you provide others, not only just here in this country, but around the world, and what you are doing to affect the global economy. You are effectively helping others, whether you see it day to day or not, to directly have a more effective and prosperous life. That to me makes you heroes. But I thought about it. In our lives, when we do something to help somebody, professionally or personally, where's the reward? Is it through the medals and decorations like we get in the military? No. I truly believe that reward only comes in one place, when you help somebody. And that's right here in your heart, knowing you did the right thing. And really, that's the only reward you should be looking for. And as we broke free from that valley where we were being shot at, we hit the Adriatic Ocean on the Croatian coastline, and we could smell the salt air inside the helicopter. We knew we were home free at that point. You would have thought we would have been screaming and cheering and high-fiving each other. But no, we weren't. If you would have been on board the helicopter to take a good look around at that moment, the only thing you would have seen were some content smiles on those camouflaged faces, knowing that 61 had gone in and 62 had come out, and no one got hurt. That was a great feeling. As I'm stepping off this helicopter now onto the pad of the LHD there, the USS Kearsarge out in the Adriatic Ocean, though, I have to let you in a little secret as to what I was thinking about, because I want you to know I've never been on a helicopter before. But as I'm stepping off this helicopter at that moment, I'm thinking that'd be a good idea to duck, because I thought it looked really stupid if I got my head chopped off by walking into rollerblades. I didn't want to do anything stupid to hurt myself after I just survived 6 days in a war zone. And the doctors brought me down to the bottom of the ship to where they could take care of me, and they put a heat blanket on me, raised my body temperature back up, and they cleaned me up because I was pretty dirty. And then they injected me with shots and IVs. I felt like a human pincushion. But then they put me into a bed to try to get some sleep, because I really hadn't slept for 6 days. But I didn't sleep for another 6 days afterwards. I was just so excited to be alive. Well, here, a doctor comes by to pay me a visit. He's by himself. He pulls up a chair beside my bed. He sits down, and he asks me, "Scott, I'm not here as an officer or a doctor. Can I ask you some questions?" I said, "That's fine." He says, "I'm just curious personally. What was it that got you through those 6 days?" And I said to him, "That's easy. My life is a gift God gave me. That was a gift I was not ready to give up on. Every single day when I wake up, I have problems, I have worries, and I have concerns. But every single day when I wake up, the first thing I do is I start off my day with just even thanking God I'm even alive. And what a beautiful day it is, because this is a day I might not even have ever had." And then the doctor, he asked me, he said, "Well, when you were praying out there, did you make deals with God to come home?" And I said, "You bet I did." But the deal I made, I knew I could live up to, as well as it's been the same thing I've been trying to accomplish in my life, even if this never happened. And I told him that I want to come home to simplify my life. And he asked me to explain that. And I said, "Well, I can only tell you what it means to me personally. I can't speak for other people. But to me, simplifying my life is realizing that all the problems and worries, concerns that I have on a day-to-day basis, if I really look at the big picture, what my true priorities are in my life, probably over 90% of the concerns that I have can be pushed off to the side. And then I can spend more time where I'm happy and successful in my life. Because I don't know about anybody else, but I want to be happy. And I want to be successful in life. But where is it when I was growing up, I thought I'd be able to find happiness and success? Well, society only told me I'd be able to find it if I had a powerful job, or if I had material wealth like $1 million in the bank account and a fast red sports car and a big white house on the side of the hill. Are those things wrong or bad? No. Don't misunderstand me. Having a job that's truly self-satisfying to me, a job that's a service to others, as you all have here in your respective professions and with Coca-Cola, that's a blessing. Having material wealth to provide freedom and security for myself and my family, again, is a blessing. I'm always looking to add to more. That's why I own Coca-Cola stock. But I thought to myself, there has to be a balance though, because I cannot solely live for work. I work to provide a life. Because I really thought about it. I had 6 days to think about my mortality. And I realized someday I'm going to die. And that's a guarantee. And I don't take any of the material things with me. And I realized then that if I had 1 day left to live to return back from Bosnia, I would not run home to hug my car. I would come home to hug my mom. And that's when I realized it was the happy times I spent with the people that I cared about, and the simple times just sharing a meal or a dinner with them to where I was able to discuss what was going on in my life, that I found my greatest happiness. And so now in my life, I will not define my happiness through the material things so much as the relationships. How happy and successful will I be in this life as a Christian? How happy and successful will I be as a son or a brother or a friend? Or even in a professional life, in my relationships with my fellow coworkers and my clients. And then in the future, how successful will I be as a husband and a father? And Carpe Diem seize the day has true meaning for me every day. It doesn't mean I'm going to jump on the plane tomorrow and go off to Las Vegas and go do something crazy and light my hair on fire like there's no tomorrow. To me, it means I need to learn to be happy today for what today has to offer. Because I have to confess to all of you here, I didn't do that for most of my life. I always thought I'd be happy at a destination. I always thought I'd be happy off in the future, whether it was getting my driver's license, graduating through high school and college, becoming a fighter pilot, or getting that next promotion. I was always focusing on being happy off in the distant future. I never was happy where I was in the present. Well, I learned very quickly in Bosnia that I need to learn how to be happy every day of the journey of my life or I never find it, because there is no guarantee of a tomorrow. And that's how I simplify my life. I explained that to the doctor and he thanked me. And he's getting up and he's walking away, but before he's gone, he turns around and he says, by the way, welcome home. He was the first person to welcome me back. And as he was walking away, I have to tell you, I had the biggest grin on my face from ear to ear. Because you have to understand, at that point in my life, I'd been living overseas in assignments for 4 years in Korea, Germany, and Italy. And when I had vacation time, I did not rush back here even to see my family members. I wanted to take that experience to travel the world. So I went through Asia, Western and Eastern Europe, the Middle East and Northern Africa. And in that education, I have to say, I saw a lot of prosperous nations and I saw a lot of poor nations. But yet, in my opinion, I cannot find a nation on this planet that can afford its citizens more rights, privileges, conveniences, and freedoms as we have here as Americans. We are so blessed to live here in this country. So I'm excited. I'm so excited. I'm going back home. I'm going to my family. And I'm flying out over the Atlantic Ocean now on this plane. Something happened, though. A little bit of fear crept into my heart. Why? Well, what was it for 4 years when I'm living outside the United States that I still heard that was occurring back here in the United States through the news channels? I heard about the riots in Los Angeles. I heard about the incident in Waco, Texas. And then just a few weeks before I was shot down over Bosnia, the Oklahoma City bombing happened, and it was perpetrated by a fellow American. I was asking myself, what is happening back in the United States of America? Are individuals failing to realize that the freedoms that we have here in this country didn't come for free? No, they were paid for by those who came before us, who spilt their blood and their sweat and their tears so that we can live prosperity today. We should never fail to appreciate that. So I have no idea what I'm going home to, and I'm wondering what kind of welcome I'm going to receive. As I step off that airplane, though, I saw something I will never forget. When I hit the tarmac there at Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C., there was a crowd there of my family members and my friends there to greet me. But there was also an additional crowd of complete strangers waving American flags and holding up a sign saying, "Welcome home, Bachelor 5-2. We've been praying for you." Do you know what I saw from that? I saw that there are people who live here in America that care about others. Individuals like yourselves who are truly concerned about the communities and the cities and the state you reside in and the future that we have here as Americans. And I've seen that now since the 11th of September, a surge of patriotism. And I have to tell you, that makes me so proud to be able to see that there's so many patriotic people like yourselves here today, that it made me proud, just as I did when I stepped out of that airplane, to be somebody who served in our armed forces overseas for 4 years. But more importantly, it's because of individuals like yourselves that even made it possible for me to be able to survive those 6 days in that war zone, to be able to come back here to my home, to be able to say one thing, that I am proud to be a fellow American. And I have you to thank for that. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.